Do you want to start recording?
Yep. Thank you. Appreciate that. All right. So that first question, just because it wasn't on the recording, was when adding a contact role to a contact in a transaction after the transaction is being created, it's not saving. It just depends on where that's coming from, on whether it's going to actually appear or not. So we're going to have to dig a little deeper. Is it coming from .loop? Is it coming from SkySlope? Is it coming from your database already? And then we can dig in a little bit more on whether it should be appearing or should not be appearing. Okay. Can you have multiple signatures, example signature that reflects your TC for separate agents? Yeah, definitely. So you can create, I don't think there's a limit. I think maybe I set the limit at like 99,999 or something like that. So you have a ton of them you can put in there. You'd have one for each agent. At the beginning of the transaction, what you're going to want to do is come over here. And then as it's approving these transactions, it's going to open up this default settings screen. Typically, when you're approving the transaction, you're going to scroll down here and you're going to choose the email that you want to send from. And you're going to choose the email signature, your texting number, which tab you want it to open up to every time you come into this transaction. There's a bunch of settings in here, but the one you're looking for is right here, the default email signature. And you're going to just set this on every single transaction as you approve the transaction. So in the future, we'll probably look at like having some kind of automated thing where, if you're working for John, you can set a John signature and have it come in. But for right now, it's just a one click, add a signature here, click on it. And there you go. Now you got that signature. So hopefully that was helpful. Okay. When doing triggers with buyers and sellers, what is the best practice? Do you, let's see here. Do you do two separate trigger task lists or do the yes, no? Okay. So Melissa, what triggers are you talking about? Are you talking about the task triggers, I'm assuming, since you said trigger task lists? Are you talking about task triggers? Are you talking about automated triggers? Are you talking about intake form triggers? I guess that's the first question I would have for you. If you're talking about task triggers, then the triggers are just firing off whether you check off the task or whether you don't check off the task by a certain date. So those are pretty easy. If you're talking about regular triggers, the automated triggers on the upgraded plan, then those yes or no questions are really helpful because now you're saying, okay, you mean property triggers. Okay, perfect. So yeah, the yes, no questions are really helpful in those because now let me go over and see if I have agent intake questions. Okay, I don't have any in here, but let me actually go to manage. We'll go ahead and stick a couple in here if I can. We'll just stick a couple in here. Okay. So these yes or no questions can trigger things to happen over here in your triggers. So some of you may not have this. This is the upgraded plan, the trigger menu. Now, what these are is a way not to have to go to a task list every day. These are a way to say, if this is true, or these 5 things are true, or these 10 things are true, then I want you to send a text message at this day and time. Okay. So the yes or no questions are cool because then you can come in here and say, if homeowner association equals yes, then I want this email to go out to my escrow officer, alerting them and letting them know or whatever. So yeah, best practice is typically using these triggers, the conditions by fields. Choice fields are great for, having different things going out. So if I chose that the buyer's going to accept the premises as is, I want a separate email than if they said that they want repairs done on the property, or if they said they want to cancel. Obviously, I would have 3 separate emails. Each one of them would be triggered by the choice in the field that I select. Now, for intake form triggers, that's more where these come in, these yes and no, because now you can say on the intake form as the agent or TC fills it out, if there's an HOA, now I want you to add my HOA fields. I want you to add my HOA tasks, and I want you to add my HOA documents. So that's kind of where these yes or no are most helpful, but you still can use them over here in the conditions for these triggers as well. All right. And as far as buyer seller, yeah, separate task lists for sure, or different trigger templates for sure, because some of these aren't going to apply to a buyer or seller. So what you can do is probably start with your buyer, copy it, clone that whole thing, and then just go back and change what you need to change it into a seller, because a lot of it will be similar. It just won't be it won't be dual use for sure. Okay. My emails in the trigger pipeline aren't showing anything in the subject line. So it looks blank until I click on it. Send that to support. We're going to have to dig into that one. I'm not sure if that's a user error or if that's a system bug. Send a video over to support and we can get that looked at. I think that's just going to be a little bit deeper conversation than what we can do here. Okay. Welcome. We got a first timer here. Will this be recorded and be shared? Yes, this will be recorded. It gets shared in the knowledge base. You'll have a record of every single one we've ever done in there. Okay. How do I assign tasks to other users? Okay, so this is kind of a two-part question. The first part of this is going over to the organization screen, which I always hit Control O to get there. That's the quickest way if you're on a PC. I think it's Command O if you're on a Mac. So you come over to the teams and I don't know if you're a one-person team, like you're doing end-to-end transactions, or if you have like one assistant, or if you have a listing team and a transaction team or whatever, but let's just assume that you have multiple teams in here. So I have like a team for Boise, a team for Phoenix, or you could go the buyer transactions, listing transaction team, or you could just go, hey, I'm doing end-to-end transactions here with the one-person team, or maybe you have a two-person team that you work together. Let's go to the two-person team. And so you're going to set a role on these people. So you want to set these roles in a way that they're going to be, think about your business in 10 years from now. How many people are you actually going to have? Let's say you have 20 people at that time, and you have intake specialists, and you have compliance specialists, and you have TCs that are monitoring the transaction, all these different people. Well, think about those people now. And if you're a one-person team, you can be all those people right now. You're everyone. But over in your tasks, what you want to do, and actually let me go to a task template. It'll be a little bit easier to explain. Okay, over in your task templates, what you need to do is, let's go to this one. And I don't think I have any of these set on here, so we can actually set them. Okay, so let's go ahead and pop this one open. And if you want to pop them all open, you can hit this button, it'll pop them all open. So how you assign it is by the role. So it depends on what team is assigned, who's going to get assigned, but you know that this email, sign contract to lender title, this is always handled by, let's just say the transaction coordinator. So you come down here and you would say, I want the person to send this would be my transaction coordinator. Okay. And what that's going to do now, oops, sorry, I clicked on the wrong thing here. What that's going to do now is it's going to go back over to your organization. It's going to look and see what team was assigned to this transaction. So let's say it was that two-person team that I showed you. Now it's going to go back over. So what happens is this all happens in milliseconds, obviously, but what it's going to do is go to the team assigned to that transaction. So actually, yeah, let me back up. What the system does in order is it comes over here and it says, who's assigned? The Acme Realty Boise team. Okay. So now it's going to go through each member of this team and look for who's the transaction coordinator. So the system's going to scan here and go, dupe, nope, nope. Yep, here's the transaction coordinator, and yep, here's another transaction coordinator. So in this case, there's two people working on this file. It would actually assign that task to both of these people because they're both listed as the transaction coordinator on that team. So I hope you're following me there. In the team, you're going to just say, or I'm sorry, in your task template, you're going to say this is assigned to a role. We want them assigned to a role because people come and go. As you grow, you're going to have 20, 10, 20, 15, whatever people on your team. Some people may quit. Some people may go on leave. You may want to back yourself out of the business and get other people to do the transactions for you while you run the business. So that gives you a lot of flexibility here because now on your team, I can come over here and take let's say Stewie is our team leader and he's going to get out of production and he's actually going to have a team of people doing his work for him while he runs the business. I can uncheck all these on him and I can check all those on the new person that I hired to take over Stewie's role. And so now thousands of tasks are updating in the background in seconds just because I unchecked these from from the team over in the organization screen. So go back over that organization screen and go to that team. And I believe that was the Boise team. And so what it does is it goes down here and it goes, yep, assign it to this person, assign it to this person. Now, what I was saying was Stewie hires someone or let's just say he's like, okay, I'm no longer going to do anything. I'm just going to be the team leader. Nothing is assigned to me. And a test person's going to take over my role. So all those roles that were on him, I would just check these. And now what just happened was those thousands of tasks just updated. It went through all, 1,000 of my transactions and switched the person that is assigned to that role. Okay. And all it's doing is coming over and seeing like what team is assigned. Say it was a listing team, it would come here and then it would look for a transaction coordinator. And whoever was obviously that's not in here because it's a listing. But if it was a transaction coordinator, it would assign that person. So hopefully that's clear. Okay. I think there's a follow-up here. It says, hi, not in the intake form. After the transaction has been approved, I added contact afterwards, which worked. It's when I tried adding the contact role, assigning them as a co-agent or a transaction coordinator that didn't say. We also don't use .loop. I don't know. I would send a video to support. I have not seen that in that case. Like I know here, let's go over to contacts and let me just try one. So it's a buyer co-agent right now. Let me switch that over to buyer. Okay. And let me switch this one to buyer. And now let me refresh this page and see if it's saved. Yeah, I don't know if that's a bug or what's going on, but yeah, send me a video over to help@opentoclose.com. We'll get our support staff to take a look at it and dig into that one. Okay. Can you talk about the utility under more? Utility under more. Got it. I was like lost there for a second. Utility. Are you talking about these ones right here, the utilities? If you are, process payment is if you have the $99 upgrade, you can actually send an invoice and you can customize what it says and send invoices out based on the, what is this based on? It's based on the intake form and how much you've set that for. So if you said it's $400 for that person, it comes into this transaction and, it will charge them. It'll have that automatically on here, 400. And then if you wanted to give them a discount, let's just say one of your TCs screwed up and you're like, okay, I'm gonna give you a $50 discount. It will actually subtract off the 50 from the 400 that would have normally came in. And that'll be on the invoice as well. So that's one part of the utility. The activity, this is something we're probably going to make a little bit more robust in the future, but activity is just going to be everything that was clicked as much as we log right now, client facing. I'm not sure why that's not coming up. It's a demo account, so we may have some issues, but basically you'd have a list of everything that was clicked on. Okay, I'll wait. Let's see what happens. So everything that was clicked on, how long the intake form took to process, things like that, that'll all be listed in that activity tab. All right, I'm all locked up now. So let me say exit page. And then let me see if there's more to that question. I thought there was a way that contacts could be set up. So if someone asks for the contact information for anyone involved in the task, it could be added in an email with a single click rather than copying the name and then copying the email and copying the phone number. Yes, there is. Okay, so let me get to that as soon as I can log back in here. Okay, so what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to do that through a smart block. The smart block is Control S to get to. You can also get to it through the left menu, but you can come in here and I have mine categorized. So I have all my contact loops. So what you're going to want to do is create a contact loop, and that contact loop, just so you know, let me get into my merge fields, which is Control A as an apple. Go to my smart blocks and or actually come over to my utilities, and this is where contact loop is. So when you want to create a contact loop in a smart block, click on this. You're going to paste it over here. So my buyer information. Okay, so this is what the contact loop looks like. It comes in start contact, end contact, and then you have to put what information for that person you would want to send off. So when I copy this contact loop, here's how it looks when I bring it in from scratch. Okay. So you would have to come in here, click in between. Then you'd have to come over here and say, I want to put in the buyer and I want to put in their full name. So I'd paste that here. And basically I just go down and do these things that I did. The BR is a space. So because I have this buyer up here, this is always going to come in. And then it will list this contact loop. What it does is it goes and puts the first buyer's information, everything I put here. So buyer one, full name, buyer one email, buyer one phone, buyer one cell phone, space. And then it's going to loop through again and go, is there a second buyer? Then it's going to go buyer two, full name, buyer two email, buyer two phone, buyer two cell phone, space. Is there a buyer three? It would list those people. So this is really easy because now if you're in an email, all you have to do is, let's just say you're in a one-off email. You would just paste that smart block into the email so that that information appears. And obviously it's going to be different on every transaction because the buyer is going to be different on every transaction. So when you paste that in, it's going to go look for the buyer on that particular transaction, or 3 buyers or 7 buyers or whatever the case may be. And it will just list those in. And it makes it really easy. So you don't have to go through and copy and paste 7 different people's information. All right. What are best practices around assigning the same role to 2 people? Number 1, most efficient way to determine who is doing the task on any given day. Number 2, if it's on a fill-in basis, what if there are nuances, details that happen that the fill-in may not realize? In a perfect world, fields or notes would be updated and checked, but yeah, right. Well, I'd say that some of this falls on training, some of this falls on, there's some backups you can put in the system. So let's just tackle this one thing at a time. Okay, best practice is I wouldn't do it if I could avoid it, right? One person does a task. If there's 2 people on a task, there's always confusion on who's doing it. So unless you guys have some incredible system where in tasks, one person, if they're not going to do it, will put a note in for the other person, or if they are going to do it, they put in a note or something like that, which I think is just a waste of time, honestly. Just depends on how your workflow is set up on what's going to be best. But for the way that I typically do things, you're going to want to assign it to one person. So I don't want that. I don't want that overlap of having 2 transaction coordinators. I know I may have a transaction coordinator assistant, maybe a VA that helps on compliance, maybe a VA that helps on intake forms, things like that. But I wouldn't have the exact same role on both. So one role, that way it's one user, one person's responsible for it. Everyone knows who's responsible for it. If it doesn't get done, we know who to go talk to. Okay, so that's my thoughts on that. Most efficient way to determine who's doing the tasks, it really depends on your team setup, honestly. I mean, if you have a team of 5 working on a transaction, then you can split it up into the 5 segments. One person's handling kind of the beginning part of the transaction, one in the middle, one at the end, maybe one overseeing, maybe one handling compliance. There's a lot of different ways to do that. So that's really a big personal preference kind of question. If it's one person doing the transaction, then, no big deal. It's just end to end. If it's on a fill-in basis, the things that you can do to protect against them not realizing things, I would say, is at the bottom of each section, having a text block here that's like transaction dates, additional notes, property access, additional notes, something maybe like, hey, don't go to the garage door and go through the garage door. If you can go in the front, the dog's locked up in the laundry. If you open up the garage door, the dog's going to be right there, blah, blah, blah. All those little things that you just can't stick in a regular field. So what I do is I have a block of data at the bottom of each section so that I can put those notes in there so that if anyone's filling in, they'll see kind of the ins and outs and all the little secret stuff that you typically store in your head. Now it's out there for everyone to see. The second part of this is using these internal details. So these internal details is where you can build your SOP. So let's just say I come to this and it says send referral info to brokerage, and I don't know what a brokerage is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here, and you train your team to know where this is. You can have notes on these and you can put notes in the templates, but you can also have these internal details. When I click this open, this is a great place to put video links, a procedure on how to do this. If you don't know how to do it, who you should go to. You can put all of these SOP type items in this internal details. And that way, no one ever feels like they don't know what's going on or what's happening with this task. They can always go back and refer to the video. They can see who the person to go to if they need help, all those certain things. So I like to store everything in internal details and basically use this as a big SOP book. Everyone used to have those big old 3-ring binders of every single procedure in their business. Well, now you can eliminate some of those and put those in the system so that you don't have to go and refer to paper somewhere or to a wiki or maybe like Notion or something like that you're building out. You can just keep it right in the system. All right. Second part of that, let me think. Good.
Do you want to touch on task blocking too? I don't know if it fits the full use case for it, but for some of those key fields that could also be beneficial
for
with
sure.
new features.
Yeah, great suggestion. So this is a new feature. This is on the upgraded plan, the new scale plan that's coming out. But we have these conditions. And what I can do here is I can come in and say, so in order for me to be able to check off this task, this field has to be filled in. So let's just say, sorry, Zoom's making my computer creep a little here. Okay, so is not blank. So tax ID has to be filled in. I don't care what it's filled in with, but it has to be filled in. So that's one condition. The second condition could be like, hey, does the lender exist or does this document exist yet? So like if you're checking off a task that says get the buyer broker agreement, well, if you don't have that buyer broker agreement, you don't want them checking that task off. So you could put all of those conditions in here, and now it's red, so that means it's not done. Over here in my fields, I can see that I have no tax ID. So if I go to check this task off, it's going to tell me, oh, what happened? Did I not save it? Oh, one or more task conditions have failed. The task cannot be closed. Okay. So what it's telling me is you have to go do this. So in this case, the TC would be like, oh, shoot. Yeah, I did forget to do that. Let me go put this tax number in. So then they could go to internal details, look to where to find that tax number, go to the assessor's page, go to the MLS form, wherever they have to go, find the tax number, and then they find out it's this number. They check that off. And now what's going to happen is go to tasks, and let me just, I'm going to refresh my tasks here. And obviously this would happen in milliseconds if you're not on Zoom and have 5,000 tabs open like I do. So there you go. One condition has been met. It's not red anymore. So now I'm able to check this task off. So if I check this task, I'm not going to do it because I don't know what these triggers are, but you can check this off now. And as you can see, this is not red. You can click into that and see that it's black now, which means it's been satisfied. Yeah, great suggestion, Gianna. That is a feature that hasn't come out yet. So I don't talk about it much, but it is a really great one, especially if you're building a bigger organization. If you're like, hey, I'm going to go out and hire 5, 6, 7 TCs, and maybe 4 or 5 of those don't even have real estate experience or have very minimal knowledge. This is a great fail safe that you could put 4 or 5 things on there to make sure that they're checking those before they check off that task, so that emails aren't going out prematurely and you're looking like you don't know what's going on as an organization. Okay. Do you have any plans to add contacts automatically to show in the details once they are assigned? Example, title agent contact information, condo association. We always have to double entry, so there's available in the details section. In the details. So you want that information over here? Is that what I'm hearing? I'm not, I guess I'm just, okay. Why do you have it over here in the fields? Can you follow up with a little explanation there? Just so I'm kind of following what the time savings is there. And no, we don't have any plans on it because in our minds, all contacts should be in the contacts tab. Field should be over here, but if there's like a good reason for it, we could definitely hear you out on that. But yeah, I don't, so we can see it without going into contacts. Okay. Yeah. I don't think we'll ever do that, honestly. I don't, there's not a huge want for it that I've heard. I mean, maybe if we, all of a sudden people start an uproar and say, yeah, we definitely need this feature, then I would say, yeah, we'll look at it, but I've never heard that before. So I would say it's probably going to be really low on the list, to be 100% honest with you.
Another thing you have to take into consideration as well, if we start to add more things to this front page, is that this front page is going to get a lot more busy than it already is. And the reason we have it organized this way is that so contacts are always underneath the contacts tab. You don't ever have to go, wait, are they not there? Did I add in this contact? You can always go to the contacts tab or check out the contacts drawer, and you'll be able to see, okay, who's on here? Who do I have that's associated with this transaction?
Yeah, you can always pop out this sidebar so that you have a sidebar of your contacts here, and then you can still be in your fields if you want to, or you can kind of see partial of the tasks. But yeah, no, I don't think that will probably happen anytime in the near future. At least you'll have to rally the troops to, you have to rally the troops to tell me that it's needed. All right. So is there a
Can you,
place? Yeah.
sorry, can I also just do a quick view on the task pipeline? Typically in your day-to-day, you're going to live oftentimes off of those Kanban views. So you do have that quick reference to your contact drawer there as well, if you need it.
Yeah, that task doesn't have a, or that, yeah, let me find one with, of course, these are all like test transactions with, that we don't waste time putting people in, but anyway, yeah, there you go. So it'd be in here.
Thanks.
Yep, good suggestion. Yeah, if you haven't adopted this yet, I would definitely give it a look. It's so easy to move things around. You want to snooze for, say everything got delayed for 2 weeks. You can come in here and delay this for 2 weeks. You can see, and just make sure your filters are turned on if you want to see everything. Here are those conditions we talked about before where they can't check off the task. They have the ability to pull up an email. They can pull open the fields on this. They can search for a field. They can pull up the contacts. This is probably the most used one right here is the documents. Pull up the documents, download, upload, all that good stuff. So, okay. Is there a place where you can track all your sales visually, like a graph or a spreadsheet with all the sales logged onto? Yeah, so spreadsheet wise in properties, you can filter down by however you want. So I could say, I want to see all my buyers. So right now I have 514 buyers, but now I only want to see my active buyers. So now hopefully that number is much lower, 68. So you can go through, and the cool thing about this is contract client type, contract status, purchase amount. You can customize all this. Oops, sorry, didn't mean to do that. Table, so you can customize what you see here. So if I wanted to see tax ID, county, and I want tax ID to be first, I can update that. And now that's going to save with this view. So now tax ID is the first column. Now, if I go back to buyers, you'll see that that tax ID is not there because every single table and table segment combo has their own view. So now you can just put the pertinent fields that you want in here. And the other cool thing about this is now you can automatically export this through the API to like a Google Sheet or whatever. You can have it update once a day. You can have it update 100 times a day. Not that I would advise that and bog down your system, but once a day at 7 o'clock, midnight, it updates your transactions over in your Google Sheet. Or if you want to do that manually, you can export. Now it's only going to export the table columns that you have in here. So if you want more table columns to show up, then you would just add those in the table columns and then hit export. All that information will go over to a sheet. Do not add every single transaction and every single field that you have unless you're willing to wait for a very long time. These are better handled through the API, through like a Zap or just straight API connection or something like that. It'll happen almost instantaneously and you won't ever have to do it by yourself. So that's really kind of a crucial thing here is just take the data that you need and get it over there. Now with webhooks, now that we're using the API and webhooks, now you can say, I'm going to come back to this, so don't worry, but let me jump over here real quick. So over in the field editor, I don't know if I have this turned on. Yep. So I have a webhook. So I can say anytime the state is updated, send that data to some other system, whether that's Google Sheets, whether that's your CRM, whether that's whatever, doesn't matter. But anytime this is updated, it's going to go ahead and send that over. So if I have that checked, anytime that field's updated, boom, just throws it right over. Okay, so back in here, you can color code these obviously. So you can come in here and say anytime that I have buyer, I want to automatically turn it red. If I have seller, I want to automatically turn it green or whatever. And that way, when these come in, you can have a nice little color coded graph here. And obviously I don't have my screen very big, but you could pull these out to whatever size you want so that you can see whatever you need to see. You do have the health bar here. You do have missing documents here. You do have the queue here, which is basically you can queue up a bunch of properties to look at. These are the important ones that I need to look at now. Now, do I want to flip through these properties? I can just flip through them. It'll open them up, go to the next one, It'll open it up. If I actually want to just go through the health bar of these, then I can just pull up the health bar. What do I need to do on this property? What do I need to do on this property? What do I need to do on this property? And I can cycle through these. And then as I get finished with them and turn them to gray, which means nothing's due in the next 2 days, I can go ahead and X these out. And that's a good way to work through your properties if you're not using the task pipeline. So tons of filters in here that you can get used to. Yeah, so I think I've kind of beat that one pretty hard. If you have any follow-up questions, go ahead and post them in there. Oh, one other thing. You do have that ability over here with this little database button where you can go into anything in here. So if I open up, let's just say I want to open up my emails for this property, I can open up the email and it's going to pop up here. And when I close it, I'm right back to where I started. So you're not having to bounce in and out of transactions all day, which I think is the biggest business killer in the world. Time killer, like talk about wanting extra time in your day. Just learn how to go from place to place without having to get into transactions to do it. You probably save 2 or 3 hours a day. Okay, can you explain MoveEasy? Yeah, MoveEasy is a utility concierge, and they're also going to have some other options coming up here that we'll do some webinars on. Well, let me read the whole question first. So I don't, can you explain MoveEasy? We kind of already concierge the utilities and such. I'm definitely open to passing that on to someone else, but I need to understand it fully first. I tried it one time, but it didn't really make any difference for me. Okay. I would go back and watch the webinar on it because it should make a big difference for you, honestly. You just go over to the, let me get into one of these transactions here. I don't know what has what, so. If you haven't signed up, it's going to ask you to sign up, which is just your name and an email. Send it over, right? So when you come in here, now you can say, this is me. Client, I want to choose Charles Barkley, fills in all his stuff. Who's the agent on this file? Stewie, fills in his stuff. I didn't have brokerage in for him. Dates, closing date, pulled that over. Is this a buyer or seller? Great, it's buyer. Contract status, it's pending. And where are they moving from or to if applicable? Obviously this one's a 2 and it already filled it in. So now you just hit the submit moving request. And what's going to happen is one of their concierges over there is going to give your client a call. Now we recommend doing this about 21 to 30 days before closing. 30 is my preference. This gives them time to follow up and not feel super rushed. Concierge will follow up with them. They're not going to call them 100 times. That is one thing that we've asked MoveEasy. We tested out a bunch of companies on this. MoveEasy was definitely the best in this case. We kind of secret shopped them, and I got like 12 calls from one person, and I don't want my clients getting 12 calls and getting angry. So MoveEasy has a really nice balance between they can use the app or they can use their concierge over the phone. And they can also use Alexa. They can actually say, oh, sorry, I have one nearby, so I'm not going to say that name anymore, but you can say, hey, so-and-so, I need to do this for my utilities, and it actually will work through Alexa too. So, oh geez, keeps lighting up on me. So anyway, that's MoveEasy in a nutshell. If you want more information, go to the webinar. They also have a fact sheet on it. And they also have like some videos that you can send out to your agents to kind of get them on board with it and show them the value. So that's all, that's in the documents of the Facebook group. And it's also like a post. And if you need me to email it to you or something, just email help@open to close and ask for it. Okay. Trying to think anything else on MoveEasy. I think that's it in a nutshell, but they're a good company, and it should take a lot of onus off of you. Now it depends on what town you're in too, right? If you're in, if you're out in the middle of a range somewhere, they may not have your utilities, and they'll still walk you through and help you find numbers and all that kind of stuff. But they won't have their automation set up on some of the things, unless you're in a semi decently sized city. I mean, I'm surprised at the reach that they have, but if you're out in the middle of like Northwest North Dakota, I don't know if they have every little small town. Okay, is there an option for an intake form that's not associated with the property? Example, onboarding info for an agent with their preference of service providers. Let me think about that for a second. Not natively, but if you have someone that can work with the API, then yes, you can pretty much have any Jot form, Woo form, Cognito form, do a lot of different things in the system. So you would just have to use the API to say, hey, I want to create a contact from this. I want to put this information in the notes. And yes, you could possibly do that, but you just have to find a really good API guy. I would recommend for something like that, you may want to Google Form import. I've never had anyone do Google Forms. Google Forms are probably they have their advantages, right? Because they're connected in the Google ecosphere. But really, if you want a good form, most people are using Cognito or Jotform or Wufoo Forms. If you're looking to bring outside transactions in, like use an outside form that's embedded somewhere into Open to Close, we just had a webinar with Daniel Poston. You can look for that on Facebook or in our knowledge base. He went through how he sets up like this little intranet type site that takes the information and then it throws it out to all the different systems that you might need it to go into. Now, if you're using that with Open to Close, you are going to need to be on the scale plan because you're going to need the triggers that happen after, not just what's in the intake form. So that's one thing. If you're looking for straight API work, we have one of the best in the business partners, and that's the BAR agency, BARA agency.com, I believe it is. If you want something connected, they truly amaze me at the stuff they're able to connect. So I would definitely reach out to them and definitely tell them that, you know, you came over from Open to Close, and they like working with Open to Close, and we love working with them. They make our jobs a lot easier. So Daniel Poston for forums, and BAR agency can help you with those as well. But, you know, they're trying not to walk on each other as far as services. And then the BAR agency for like API connections, they're lights out. Okay, cool. Also, there's another company too, if you're using Follow Up Boss, Osiris, OSIRS.co. They have some really cool stuff in the works too. And they have some cool stuff coming on the platform. So those are some of the 3 best API type advisors. Okay, this one says, mind blown. How do you update the Google Sheet automatically at set date and time? Candace, you got to use the API. So I would reach out to Justin. Well, maybe not Justin, he owns a company, but one of the guys over at the BAR agency, BARA agency.com, and they can pretty much hook up anything that you want. Typically using Zapier, but sometimes they just go straight to API connection. You tell them, here's the data I want, here's where I want to get it. How do I do it? And they will walk you through that whole thing. Yeah, really, really good guys too. Not just a good company, but really good people. Spelling is BARA agency.com. Matthew or Gianna, can you just fact check me on that and make sure that their website comes up? Oh, Osiris. Yeah, that's a really confusing one. OSIRS.co. So OSIRS, basically it looks like .co. And Jeff and Brian and Freddie over there, they awesome team and have a lot of cool stuff, especially if you're using Follow Up Boss. I mean, a lot of cool connection points. I use it myself in my own business. So, all right, we are out of questions. What time is it? 11:40. All right. Well, I don't have anything else to go over on this one. If anyone has any questions, I'll give you another 4 minutes. We'll hang out here till 11:45 my time Pacific. And if I see any questions pop through, I'll go ahead and answer them. If not, I appreciate you guys being on here again. You guys make these so much easier for me by asking questions and kind of guiding me through what you need to know versus just what I want to kind of blurt out at you. Any of the team have anything that they've seen this week that, you know, is really important to go over? Or if not, that's fine too.
The only thing I've had is, and I don't see any of the people that, well, I mean, I see a couple of you guys. Hi, it's me, it's Hannah. See a couple of you guys we met before. I know we had talked a little bit about sort of intake forms and adding on triggers and how to add them on. I don't know if you want to go and just open up an intake form and show them sort of the layout for it. We've been talking a lot about sort of just making that conditional information of, you know, if we have an inspection, then bring on the inspection information. through the form triggers. So really, most of you guys are probably right now still playing around in your fields and trying to figure out what questions you want to ask yourselves or your agents, to then build the logic off of it. Do we have anyone that wants to ask a specific question on it? It looks like some are coming in.
Okay, cool.
I figured Larisha was, I knew you were going to come and be like, wait, that's right.
Well, let me go over something that I saw in a meeting I had yesterday, I believe.
Yeah, definitely.
I've said this a few times, but some of you are new to this. So anything that's green over here, this is what the TC is going to see in the transaction. This needs to be only checked on things that are coming into 100%. And I cannot stress that enough, 100% of your transactions. Okay. Otherwise, you're going to have these fields in there that don't apply to the transaction. So you shouldn't have any green checked here of things that come in 95% of the time or 5% of the time. How you want to handle that is through form conditions and form triggers, but mostly form triggers to say, you know, let's just use a well, for example. Like a well is on maybe 3% of my properties. Well, in here in my conditions, I would have if well equals yes, then bring in my well fields, my well tasks, my well documents, my well triggers. I can trigger all that off of well being yes, but I don't want all that stuff in my transaction if there's no well. It's just useless and it confuses a new TC, and you know there's a myriad of problems there. So that's the one big thing. The second big thing is when at all possible, if you're bringing in fields, bring in the whole field section. So if septic is yes, make sure that you have all your septic fields tied together. So you can say bring in this section. I've seen a lot of people have dates. So like they'll have a date section, they'll have dates for HOA and dates for septic and dates for well and dates for FERPTA and all these things that may or may not happen. Well, it's fine if you want to do that. If you want to have a date section, it's totally fine, but it adds a little bit of onus on you to pay attention. If you go and change fields in the future, so if you bring in this whole field section and you add or delete fields, it doesn't affect anything. You don't have to go and edit your intake forms because they're all in there. So it's just grabbing this and what's currently in there and it's bringing it in. But if up here you had a bunch of dates and one of them was HOA date, and HOA is, if HOA is yes, bring in this HOA field section, but you also have an HOA date up here. Now you have to have a separate trigger to bring in this singular field. And if you ever delete or add another HOA field, you have to remember, and let's just say that you have 6 intake forms. Now you have to go through all 6 intake forms and you have to think, okay, I have to have this field in all 6 of these. And so you just want to be really careful about adding individual fields that have something to do with a field section that aren't contained in that field section, or you may be creating a headache for yourself as far as maintenance goes in the future. Because a lot of people are building pretty big systems with a lot of automation. And as we release some of these new things that are coming out, it's going to be even a lot more automation that you can do. And to remember all that, it's just not feasible for any typical human being. You're going to have to either, if you do decide to do that, you're going to have some kind of place where you put those things that you need to check every single time. Like, did I do this? Did I add this? Did I delete this? Okay, what are the steps that I need to go and check just to make sure that you're not screwing up your system by doing that? What else did we go over in that meeting yesterday that was a little bit, you know, as we always say, date templates. If you're bringing in triggers and you're applying a date template, you can only apply one date template at a time. Okay, because we can't have 2 date templates and them have similar fields that they're calculating, and then it's trying to figure out which one it should actually calculate. So if it's, you know, if I had a field in one date template that said inspection end, and it was 10 days after acceptance, and then I had another date template that says 7 days after, well, now the system's totally confused and not going to know how to do it right. So we only allow one date template. You're going to make a really big date template. And then whatever fields aren't contained in that transaction, don't worry, they're not going to calculate. They're not going to screw up any of your conditions. They're not going to screw up any of that. It puts up a kind of a fake wall in between the fields that exist and the fields that don't exist, so that only the things are firing off that actually exist in that transaction. And if you see dates that aren't firing off, well, you need to take a look and say, is this field contained in my transaction? Because if that field's not contained, it's not going to calculate. So, and the other thing that me and Hannah talk about all the time is like up here, this should be all your fields. You know, your triggers that deal with fields should be first, and then all your templates, because one of these fields that you're bringing into the transaction may be triggering another template to come in. Well, it can't trigger that template. If you had the template up top here, it's not even going to have the fields in the transaction to trigger that. And these do go in order. So it goes this first one, it fires it if it needs to. It goes the second one, it fires it. Third. So when you're thinking through these and adding triggers, they're going in chronological order. So you always want your date template to be last because you want all your fields to be brought into the transaction before you start calculating. And you want your templates to be after your fields so that you can make sure that they're getting triggered correctly with the right fields that came into your transaction.
Exactly. Yeah. And the best way to sort it, because as you start to build this out, you might start with your fields first, right? You might start adding in your fields first. And this one is obviously, there's a lot on here. We always suggest start with your fields first so you know how you want it built out. And then once you get to the point where you're ready to add on your task templates, this screen, what Andrew's showing here is all he did was click on sort triggers. And then now what he can do is he can sort those triggers and he can make it so that all the fields are at the top and then you've got your templates underneath them.
Okay, so here's the other thing is this red. These red ones are the ones that are internally approved. This is the second stage. So when the agent submits the form, the green ones fire.
Yep.
And then the TC goes through and fills out their part and checks everything and does all that. And then the red ones will fire. So that's another thing to pay attention to is, do I want that date template to fire on the front end or the back end? Do I want this, task template to fire on the front end or the back end? Is it something that the TC needs to check? If it is, then you probably want to fire it on the agent side when they submit, if you have that enough information. If it's something that the TC doesn't have to see until after the transaction is approved, then you may want to fire it on the second approval stage.
Exactly.
So you just want to kind of think through these things and think like, okay, what do I want to happen? Start with the end in mind. I'd say that is probably the best advice in any section of the program that I can do. And that's how I do it when you guys call me and say, I'm trying to, or you're like, I don't know why this isn't firing. And I'm like, what are you trying to do? That's the first question. What's the end goal? Once you have the end goal, then you can kind of work backwards. And it's a little bit easier than trying to envision the whole process from start to finish. Start with the end goal, and then we'll find the simplest form to get you to that end goal.
Another thing that I've stressed to you guys multiple times is that we want to bring in your fields first. We want to bring in those fields so that you have eyes on them, so that if you're looking over that contract before approving it and you see that the agent said HOA, but you're looking through the contract and there is no HOA, you have the opportunity to change that intake question from yes to no. So that way you can remove the field section and you can remove the task template that would get applied. So that's another reason why having your fields for agent submitted for the most part is the best, option for you. And then having your task templates on internally approved. In every instance, you are going to want to have that agent submitted and always want to review it before approving it. It really is just to give you that option to just double check. Does everything look correct? Was the intake form filled out correctly? Yes. Then go ahead and go forward with the approval. Oh, the other thing that I've seen a lot too is that you guys are like, wait, why do I have to keep setting the dates every single time? You can always go underneath settings, and then this is how you're setting up that date calculation. This is where you're deciding whether you want to do calendar days, federal days. Now, this isn't going to alter what's on your date template. This is just for anything that is not included on your date template. Okay. So this is just setting it for whatever it is base. If it's not included on the date template, this is the calculations that it's going to follow. If it is on your date template, it's going to override and match what's on your date template. So if you have this combination of calendar days, business days on your date template, trust your date template to do the calculation. It will do it if it's set up correctly.
Yeah. And think of this as kind of the first layer. It's like two filters, right? It goes through this one first and it says, okay, calendar days and count federal holidays. But then if it gets down to a task that has don't count federal holidays, it's going to go to the lower on the totem pole because that's the one that's more precise. This is more of a general, that's more of a precise. It's always going to default to the more precise, especially like escrow emails, attorney emails. What's the other one? Lender emails. I always try to weekend roll those back to a business day. A lot of those, especially escrow, usually they're out of the office on Saturday, Sunday, and they're not responding unless you have a unicorn of a escrow officer. 99% of them aren't working Saturday, Sunday. So I always roll it back to Friday, or sometimes you may want to set it even earlier so they see it and have a couple of days to work on it. But definitely putting this on a Friday is much better than having it land on a Saturday and having to wait till Monday.
Absolutely. Yeah. The only other thing about this screen is obviously the layout. I tell you guys all the time, we want it to be address at the top, then property details. You can do transaction dates next. And then you want those agent intake questions. Everything below that should be coming in based off of your form conditions. Do we want to bring on the property access? It should be on after you ask that question. Do we need property access details?
I would say the only caveat to that is, hold on, I have to cough. Sorry about that. The only caveat to that would be if you're one of the people that like to have the dates all scattered, all those
Oh, yes.
kind of dates at the top, and something's coming in. Let's just say that you have all those dates in like a transaction dates right here. Okay.
Mhm.
You may want to put that one under your agent question. Anything that's going to change, you probably want to default to under the questions, because if those questions have an effect on which of those are coming in or out of the transaction, you're going to want those to be below, because you're not going to want to have to scroll back up. You're not going to know that you're missing something.
Yeah,
So
that's a
now,
definitely good point. Yeah.
it will alert you on the submitted phase or on the review phase. It's going to say that this is red, but it's a real pain in the butt once you get done with the form to have to go back to page one if you forgot something. So like Anna said, that was a good order she gave you. The only caveat being if you do split up
If
those
you do
dates,
have those transaction dates.
put
Yeah,
those under.
exactly.
Yeah.
I think I misspoke the first time too. I think I usually do like address, because I read it now again. I was like address, property details, transaction details, then agent questions, and then everything else should be below it.
Yep.
So I missed the transaction details.
Yeah, just take a look at your individual system.
Exactly.
That's definitely a general that works with 99% of people, but some people just get real fancy. Like we just heard someone puts contacts over in their fields. So
Exactly,
like
yeah.
that's something totally different from what most people do. If you do something like that, you'll have to think through your layout a little bit more than most. So internal details, that's another thing that people don't see very often. I'll get to you after I say this. This is, these things have to be checked off before it becomes a transaction. So if you have things that you want your TCs to be alerted to, and you don't want something to slip through the cracks, you could even put a question, did you do this or did you do that? And they have to physically check these off before it can become a transaction. So these are really helpful, and I don't see a lot of people using them. So sorry, who did I cut off there?
Just me. Actually, I'm going to piggyback off of both of those. One fun thing that I didn't realize when I was first learning that is you can have internal instructions on some of your conditional information as well. Main use case that I found for that is when I'm dealing with some oddball type situations. Maybe this is a 1031 exchange sale. Maybe it's a septic system and I need to go find something. As Andrew's showing you, under your form conditions tab, when you select your assets, you have the option to put in dynamic internal instructions. So same thing, it will require you to check this off when you're approving your intake form, but it's only brought in if the condition is met.
So if contract client type equals buyer, then bring in whatever I write out here, call the buyer and introduce yourself, set up earnest money delivery. Those would be two things. Now you may want to have these as tasks. I just put these in here as an example to kind of alert people to it. But having these little things in here is really helpful based on what it is, especially like Jana said, 1031 exchange is a great example. I was thinking short sales, but like anything that's just a seller financing, a lot of times people just don't do those on a daily basis. So it's the things that you don't do very often that you want to kind of alert your TC to. And also having those task templates to come in. If this is seller financing, I want my seller financing task template to come in. So I'm not dropping the ball of something that I just don't do on a regular basis. And I don't have quite the expertise that I do on a residential resale transaction or whatever your specialty is.
Awesome. And the other thing I wanted to piggyback on was with layout. We actually had some questions come in this week on they had their field sections in the correct order, but their fields were out of order. And so if you haven't done this already, you may want to pop into your field editor and organize the fields in your field sections if you need to get a little bit more control of when things are prompted on your intake form. So just wanted to throw that out there as a additional piece.
Yeah, definitely.
We have one more question here. In the very beginning stages of setting up my system, I've entered my tasks and corresponding emails. I'm touching on triggers for each one, but now I want to do smart blocks. Can you please review how to insert the smart blocks? So yeah, over in the email templates. Okay, so let's just go down to, let me see if I have a decent one in here. Okay, so here's a smart block. So to view a smart block, this is kind of interesting. You just hit this SB. A lot of people don't know that's there. You just double click. It'll highlight everything in there because there's no spaces. When you hit the SB, it's actually going to pop it up in another window here and show you what would come in if contract client type equals seller. So if it's a seller, this whole thing is going to pop in right here. And there's a space at the end so that it doesn't run up against this one. So definitely pay attention to this formatting as you bring these in, and make sure you're testing them in a sample transaction. Go into a sample transaction, apply this template, change the fields, apply the template again, make sure it's only coming in when you want it to, make sure that the layout looks good, make sure that it's very readable, all those things that you're looking for before you actually implement that actual smart block in your business. So do a lot of testing before these go out. You don't want to accidentally send something out and realize that this is putting 4 spaces in there instead of 1 or some weird thing like that. Yeah, so inserting smart blocks, all you're going to do is go here, or you hit Control A, pops this open, you go to smart blocks, you grab the smart block that you've created, it'll copy it, and you just come over in the email and you just paste it. And now that smart block is in there. So really, really easy. Just be ultra careful. Here, let me actually just click on Control S, we'll open up the smart blocks. There's one thing you just want to be cognizant of when you're doing these is make sure these conditions are good. A lot of people will do all this good work and everything's great, and they'll forget to put a condition in. And they're like, why is this coming in on every single transaction? It's because they forgot to put the condition in. And don't forget that you can do an or statement here by clicking on this blue part, field. So in this case, it's a field. If I click on this blue, it's actually going to create a child condition, which means it's an or. So if this is true or the next thing is true, this will still come in. You can do if this or this or this or this or this or this. So you can have, I think I have like 8 of them in one of mine, because there's a choice field with 8 selections. And so if any of those are true, then you can go ahead and put that in. So don't forget to use those, and you can group them. You can do and ors, and you can this or this and this and this and this or this. So like there's a lot of different things you can do here. I think a lot of people are trying to keep it basic while they learn, which is great strategy. But as you get a little bit more advanced, don't forget that that option is there for you.
One thing to also throw in there, sorry. We do see this sometimes with building condition logic. Just make sure you're asking for those fields on your intake forms. This is for your intro emails. Oftentimes that will help you ensure these merge fields are going to backfill correctly. And then from there, what we were talking about further with your internal instructions. If you need your team to update fields, just make sure we're tracking which fields you're needing to update so your conditions work the way you intend them to.
Yeah, if you're going to be putting in merge fields, don't make sure these are coming in every single time. Like these are really something like financing. I would not have that in there. That would be a smart block for me. That would be like type of financing, but this one sentence would only come in if there's financing. This sentence would only come in if there's a home inspection. Acceptance date, closing date, EM. Yeah, most of that stuff standard, at least in my state. But these 2 things I would have as separate smart blocks in line here. So this right here, what are the next steps? I don't ever want to see if applicable in my stuff. I want it to seem like I typed out this email for the client, and that is why we have smart blocks. So this was probably just some sample email we grabbed from TC Workflow or something, but in this case, I would make this a smart block and say, is there an inspection on the property? If it's yes, go ahead and pop this in. Is there earnest money? Yes, pop this in. Is there an appraisal? Yes, pop this in. So these would all be smart blocks, unless it's things that are going to happen on every single property, like title work or whatever. Okay, one more question, and then we're going to bolt. Thanks for hanging in, the people that did. I don't see a lot of point to have a property template with triggers and conditions. Okay, so a property template with triggers and conditions. If those are set up properly, you wouldn't have to worry about a property template, right? Is that just an old feature? Yeah, so yeah, property templates, just for the people that don't know, is more for if you're doing manual transactions, honestly. We put these property templates in to save you some time. Over in our old program, TC Workflow, you know, when you fill out you would fill out a manual transaction. It's more like this. Like if you're not filling out an intake form, oh, sorry. You go, okay, I'm going to fill out 1, 2, 3, 4, San Diego. This is my team. This is my user. And here's my portal. And then instead of having to, once I create this transaction, go and say, I want this template to come in, and I want this template to come in, and I want this template to come in, and having to do those all individually, what we did for the people that are doing manual transactions is we created these property transactions, or these property templates, I'm sorry. And what that is it's a bunch of other templates. So now if I select this one template, if I just say apply the demo sample, it's actually applying 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 templates without me having to go through all 10 things and click and find and click and find. So that was the purpose of it, Candace. If you're using triggers with conditions, there's absolutely no reason to use property templates. Now, if you're going to use the API, just kind of keep this in your back pocket. If you want to have things like exported out of the system and things coming into the system, if they're coming in, a property template is a good way to, we don't have a way to say, grab this task template, but we do have a way in the API to say, grab this property template. So each property template would just have one task template in it or one document template. And that's kind of a workaround to using the API and getting certain things to apply to transactions. That's kind of off topic. Most of you aren't going to use that, but I just wanted to point it out for anyone going to go heavy into the API. So property templates are more for manual transactions. I mean, there are some use cases for them, like after the fact, you find a well on the property. Well, now you could have one with like put my well documents and my well tasks and whatever. And then you could just say, apply this property template for, I found a well after contract acceptance, and it'll put all 3 of them in at one time instead of you having to go and manually do those. So, anyway, that's kind of the long and short of it. If you want some more, we can definitely jump on a call and I can walk through that a little bit more with you. But I would say, unless you're doing manual transactions, don't really use property templates. Use the triggers and conditions from the intake forms, from your task templates or your task triggers, and also your automated triggers. Those are the 3 best ways to do it. Okay, that's it. Larisha, is that I'm completely lost with document templates. We'll get with you on document templates. Just send in a, if you want to send in a question to help at open to close, we can get you a video. Actually, I have a video in the knowledge base that walks through the whole documents tab and how to use it and why to use it and all that. So that may be a good place to start. But if you need some specific instances, feel free to just email in and we'll get you the information you need. All right, guys. Sorry, I ran over. Thank you for being here again. Really appreciate your questions. Yeah, back same time next week. And then tomorrow is our new partnership announcement with the company to help you with some offshore workers if you're needing that help or want to take a vacation, all that good stuff. Definitely be there. It's 11 o'clock Pacific, 2 o'clock Eastern. We'll talk to you next week. Have a great day.